Another key question to ask leadership about their way of working is if their teams are empowered to change their processes based on what they learn. This is one of those critical things that in order for a group of people to work as effectively as possible, that doesn't mean they work like another team working on the same product or another team working on a different product. It means that every team, although we're going to perhaps follow some general guidelines about how we want to do business with our customer, perhaps that represents the cadence of delivery to our customer. We need teams to be empowered to change their process based on what they learn, because just because you've decided that something needs to be a certain way doesn't mean that that adds value to this team. It might actually be waste for team A while it is value for team B. And we need to recognize that. We want to maximize the amount of value that teams are able to create, which means we need to minimize any waste. A great example of that is I used to work for an organization. I was an employee of Merrill Lynch back in the day. And because they had a trading desk software within the body of their organization, there were certain processes that had to be in place for all software in the organization, even if it had nothing to do with this trading desk bit. So the trading desk defined those processes and everybody had to follow them. So I was building a small CRM system for a group of about 20 sales folks who were making calls, calling people up, selling them mortgages. And what they wanted was a way to tappy interface, pop the call. I'm running it on my desktop or my laptop, and I'm able to click, see the phone numbers, call them up, see notes, but just a simple CRM system. And in order to deliver that, I had a whole bunch of constraints that I had to work within. One was that I had to have the architecture signed off before I started, and any changes to the architecture need to be signed off as well. So if you think about as you're building the product, you can't go, oh, actually that architecture I thought I was going to use is wrong. I need to do something different. It all has to go through an architectural change review board, right? Central environment. And it was very time consuming. So they didn't get back to you within a few days. They got back to you within a few weeks or a few months, because they maybe only sat once over a period, or they had a backlog of work, right? So that's one thing. For a small system that doesn't have a lot of consequence or any consequence for the rest of the business and only affects a small number of people, that's a little bit of overkill, right? I also had to have all of the systems that I used, even though they weren't publicly facing, pen tested. So we had to pay an external company about $20,000 per pen test to pen test our system, even though it was internal and the data was of no consequence. It's not the trading desk system. It's a small data set for a small group of people. Yes, it has some PPI, but from a risk value factor, we probably could have done a lot less security overture and still provided on the compliance for the PPI, external PPI compliance side. So that was a bunch of waste that we couldn't change. And what was the other? There's two more. We had when I had to deploy to an environment, I had to have 3 servers: front end, middle tier, back end. So the database running on one server. I had to have a separate server for the middle tier, the APIs. So it had to have APIs that were available, and then the front end had to run on a separate machine. So you had to have those 3 servers part of that mix. So you had to pay for them. So it was actually worked out about $3,000 per month for those 3. And then you had to have a dev environment, a test environment, a UAT environment, and a production environment. So that was $3,000 per environment, and I had to have 4 environments for a little system that was just used by 20 people in a call center. Total overkill, total waste for what it was we were created. Those were processes that were imposed on us from the rest of the business. Even worse, we were doing continuous delivery. And in the organization, if you didn't submit a change request for a deployment of your product more than, I think it was 6 weeks in advance, it was considered an emergency and you got a black mark against your name. And we were doing daily continuous deliveries on a number of different products that we were creating. So we got a lot of black marks. In fact, we got the most black marks of any department. I think the combined black marks of every other department in the whole organization, because we were doing continuous delivery, because we were starting to use modern engineering practices, we were punished within the organization because that's not the way we do things here. So are your teams empowered to change their processes based on what they learn so they can make everybody's lives better and maximize the value that you deliver to your customers? If your answer to any one of these questions, or the answer of your business to any one of these questions, is no, we're not doing that, then I probably wouldn't consider that you're already in the agile space, right? You're not already agile. You might be working towards it and you might have put in loads of effort, but unless you can mark every single one of these 6 questions as, yes, we do this, this is how things work here, then we're still lacking, we're still trying, we're still working towards being agile. Now, this is just a litmus test dreamed up by the US Department of Defense, but they are probably the least likely place for you to expect something with this high a bar to have come from. And I'm not going to go into a team and work with a team or a company, and if they're not doing these things, then I'm going to say, well, you guys suck, you're not agile because you're not doing this. That's not how we work towards success. But I think it's hugely valuable from the perspective of self-reflection for you all to think about the processes and practices in your organization, and how many of these 6 questions are you able to achieve, and what could you do to make it a little bit easier for the teams, for the people doing the work, to work towards this idea of not being Agile BS.